Hello, and welcome to the SharePoint Framework and JavaScript Special Interest Group Biweekly Sync. It is December 21st, 2017. I hope everybody is in the holiday spirit, whatever holidays one might celebrate. I know we're all getting ready for a little bit of time off, which is always wonderful to get to spend with friends and family. But first, we're going to do our sync. So, this call, and we like to go over what this is for folks that might be new to the call or watching these videos for the first time, is part of the SharePoint Patterns and Practices program. And so this particular call is a special interest group around SharePoint Framework, where we discuss what's new with SharePoint Framework and the development patterns that go alongside SharePoint Framework, as well as sort of JavaScript client-side development in general and the JavaScript core components and the client-side patterns and practices libraries that we all work on together as a community. So two links down there at the bottom. The first is to the Microsoft Tech community, the SPPNP-community. Will take you to the Microsoft Tech community, sort of the SharePoint, I guess, area or channel or whatever we call it there for SharePoint development. It's a great resource if you have general questions, things like that, that aren't necessarily an issue for one library or another. That's a great place to get those kind of questions answered. And the second link is a link to the official documentation for SharePoint development. So do check that out. We're working to update that as often as we can as well. So moving right ahead, our agenda for today, we're going to do a quick update on the JavaScript core component, and then I've got a couple of demos around that we'll talk about later, or do after we do a SharePoint Framework update from VESA, the latest news since the previous special interest group. And then we've got a demo. I want to talk through updating a solution from SPPnp-JS to the new @pnp scoped libraries. And I think that'll be a nice first step for a lot of folks to see what that process is going to be like, and hopefully see that it's not going to be nearly as painful as people might have imagined. And then I believe we should have plenty of time for Q&A at the end of this call, so get your questions ready. But first, let's talk about opportunities to participate. These have never changed, but we like to remind folks of the different ways you can get involved in both this call and the larger Patterns and Practices program. The first one is demo a SharePoint Framework solution. So usually we don't this week, but typically we have a lot of community demos on these calls. And if you would like to be or do one of those demos, just get in touch with us. We'll get you on the schedule and you can do your demo on the call. Typically those are going to come from web parts or extensions that have been submitted to the gallery on GitHub, but that's not necessarily a requirement. But that does also get you a little bit additional visibility into the work you're doing, the cool demo you've created. You can contribute on GitHub. So contributing on GitHub involves pull requests, submitting code. It involves submitting issues when you find issues in the JavaScript core libraries or any of the libraries, helping on issues. Sometimes folks have questions, and participating in, we've got a couple of discussions on the core library issues list right now. So jumping in and letting your voice be heard. The third point, excuse me, is demoing a SharePoint Patterns and Practice or SPPnp-JS project. In a project or a demo, it could be inside SharePoint Framework, not inside SharePoint Framework, and that'll apply as well to the upcoming @pnp scoped libraries. Welcome any demos having to do with those things as well once those get out there in the world and released a little bit more. And then finally, we're always looking for feedback. So feedback on these meetings and the content within, feedback on the libraries, feedback on the general SharePoint Patterns and Practices program. You can submit that feedback publicly or reach out to us privately, but we really do appreciate and listen to the feedback we get from everyone out there in the community. You all are why we're doing this work, to sort of foster and build and enhance the SharePoint developer community. So we want to make sure we're responsive and listen to your thoughts on how we're doing and what we could do better. So we'll step into an update on the JavaScript core component. We released earlier this week on the 18th, on time for once, released SPPnp-JS 303. It was a smaller update, but it had a couple cool new additions in there, as well as a couple bug fixes. But we now have support for regional settings off of the web object, and then you can now get list item versions. Previously, we only supported
7 5 3 4 6 7.
I'm going to mute that secret code. That's my
there
password.
We go. Yes.
Let's all ignore
How did that happen?
Yeah, I don't usually say my password here on the calls. But so previously we only supported document versions, and so we've added support for the list item versions. And just a heads up, the REST API for list item versions is much more limited than the document API. For example, you can't go get previous versions and things like that the way you can for documents. But you can look them up now, look up the versions, so we've added the support we could there. Work continues on the @pnp scoped libraries. I wanted to get the release out before the end of this calendar year. The code is basically ready at this point, but I'm still working on documentation. So it looks like early 2018 for getting those libraries out there. And I'm going to demo today on how to update a solution from pnp-js to these new libraries. And just want to point out again that they are available as beta versions right now. So if you grab those, and I'll show that again in the demo, but if you want to grab those off the beta channel, you can begin working with them or trying them out over the holiday break if you have some time. And then finally, the issues list, I just wanted to mention, we do have a few discussions going on there about, one about large batch processing, and then a second around support for a new API that we're getting some good feedback on, so we might add support for that. So if you have thoughts, want to comment on those threads, absolutely welcome that feedback, and would encourage you to go participate in those discussions. So stepping in, I guess according to the slides, I'll do my demo now. So let me switch over to my desktop. And I'll ask for somebody to confirm when that comes through on your end.
Loading 3 dots. And there we go. I can see Skype.
Okay, so it looks like loading for Ralph. Give it one more second.
Yeah, all good. All good. Good to go.
We don't all have this amazing Finnish internet. So what I wanted to show, actually let me do this real quick. What I wanted to show is in issues list, there's a couple tagged here as discussions. Feel free to join in. We've got some great comments on those so far, and would definitely welcome if anybody else has additional thoughts on implementing either this new API or on how to support large batch processing, which is probably not going to be something we're going to add into the library, but rather we're going to produce code samples around how to do that. The batching in the library is already complex enough without making it more complex. So real quick, I wanted to show folks how to update a solution from pnp-js library to use the new @pnp scoped work. So what you see here, this is a Hello World web part created in SharePoint Framework. And all I've done is run the Yeoman generator. I've created the boilerplate Hello World web part with no JavaScript framework. So this is no frameworks, no any confusion. It's just the straight up JavaScript Hello World web part. And then I've added SPFx to the library, and I've imported some things we're going to use. So the PNP root object, which I think most folks may have been familiar with if you've used the library. And then we've also imported some individual items. So for example, the web class, the util class, and then logger, the log level, and the function listener, logging listener. So I want to kind of step through where we added that. So first, we're setting the active log level to verbose. And then we're subscribing a new function listener to, and this logger is the SPFx logger. So we're subscribing a function listener that is then logging to the SharePoint Framework log. So this is not something you're required to do, but I wanted to sort of demonstrate hooking up this logger to the SharePoint Framework logging, so all the logging will kind of go through one channel and end up in the same place, which by default would be the console in the browser, but you could write your own SharePoint Framework loggers and things like that. But we won't get into that. But we have subscribed a logger to the SPFx work here. I've added the on-init code, so every time you work with SPFx within SharePoint Framework, you need to pass in the context of that web part or that extension. And the reason for that has to do with how SharePoint Framework itself works, in that the only valid context is the one contained in essentially the closure of that web part. There is no sort of global context. A lot of you might be familiar with the SP page context global variable on classic SharePoint pages, and that's something we had made use of internally in the library. And that idea of global context goes away with SharePoint Framework, and that has to do with some of the ways things get loaded and some of the ways things might get loaded in the future. So it's important to always add this on-init block, and you can see that that's on the wiki if you need to grab that. And then in the render method, we've written, again, this is obviously a very complicated web part, but we show a simple loading message. And then we're showing a couple different techniques here, because I wanted to show updating some different things. So we're taking our web instance, and we're actually setting from the context directly the absolute URL of the web we want to use. And so if you do this, you don't actually have to do the on-init work. But I wanted to show doing this, and so we get a web, and we're selecting its title. And then we're using the getAs method, which is a part of SPFx that allows us to type our return. And we're saying we're going to get back an object that has a title that's going to be a string property. And then we're calling then, or saying then, and that's getting the promise. And we're saying on that web, we're just going to update our DOM element. So if you've done SharePoint Framework work, this is our web parts DOM element. And we're going to say its inner HTML is just going to be an h1 tag that says the web title is the title of the web we just got. And then we're going to make a second request here using the PNP object that we imported from SPFx to do our full method chain. So we're going to say PNP SP web lists, select the title of each of the lists, and again we're going to do a getAs, but you can see here our object is going to be a title. That's a string, but now is an array of things coming back. And so we're going to do then, and we're going to append to that inner HTML element just an HR, and then the lists that are in this web. And so if I am very lucky, let me actually refresh the page so we get our web part, and hello world. And so we can see it work. We get the web title, and then we see it has these lists. And I'm doing this in my tenants workbench, so I'm actually talking to SharePoint. And again, this was to simplify things. So we're not mocking data or doing any of the necessarily best practices we should do for production web part, but this is just to demonstrate kind of the updating of the code. So I'll move that off to the side. And now we want to update this to use the new @PNP scoped libraries. So our first step is to go to the command line, and I'm going to hit Control-C to get out of the server. And then the first thing we want to do, let me pull up my notes so I don't have to type all this, is we're going to install the new libraries. So the first thing you're going to notice, or maybe the second thing, but the first thing you're going to notice is we're installing 4 different libraries instead of 1. And the reason for that is we've split things up into individual libraries. And the reason for that is it gives us a lot more flexibility in the work we do, but it gives you all much more flexibility in what you import as well. And give me 2 seconds, because I forgot to show you one other part of my demo that is going to make this a little clearer. And so if we look here, this is the actual file that gets generated of the dist when we do the build or serve, and it's 452K. And that's including its build. I'm not doing any external, so that's building the SPFx into this file, and we're at 452K. So just kind of keep that number in the back of your head. So splitting up these things allows you to import less stuff that you don't need. And the second thing is I'm importing from the beta channel for all of these things because we haven't done a real release for this stuff yet. So get the thing, if you want to play with this right now, grab it off the beta channel. That'll be the latest work. And then I'll say save to this because we want to be dependent on these libraries. So I'm going to hit run. And while that's running, I'm going to check and see if we have any questions.
All good, all good. I can jump in if there's any questions. So.
Okay, great. And so this will take a second to do the npm install. And when we're done...
And just to reiterate, because there's new people arriving on the call all the time. So in here, Patrick is showing how to upgrade existing web port, which is using the pnp-js-core to the latest stuff, which is in the PNP scope.
Indeed.
And now you can continue. Yes.
So we've installed our 4 libraries, which you can all see are at beta.7. So one of the new things with the libraries is because there's a bunch of libraries instead of one, versions could get very confusing. So one thing we're going to do is every library is going to be released every time, whether it has an update or not. And that means every time you want to ensure you've got the latest versions or that everything matches, you just have to make sure everything's on the same version. So in this case, it's beta.7. Once we do a release, it'll be 1.0, and then they'll all go to 1.0.1, etc. So everything will move in lockstep, and that'll hopefully reduce a lot of the confusion that could happen with different libraries and do these versions work together and that sort of thing. So then I want to come in, and we need to start updating our web part now to use the new @pnp scoped libraries instead of the SPFx. So we actually don't have that much work to do, but we have a few small changes to make. The first one, of course, we need to update our imports to import from the new libraries. So I'm going to do an import, and the first thing we want to import is the logger, the function listener, and the log level. And we're going to now import those from that PNP logging. And then we've got a little duplicate error there, so I'm just going to comment those out. And now we need to import our util. So I'm going to import, whoops, that's not how you spell anything. And that comes from this @pnp common library, which is going to have a lot of the common shared functionality in it. And again, I'll show this right after I do this, but we're working to document all these things and where the different classes have moved to and that sort of work. And that's a place we'll definitely be looking for feedback on from everybody on making sure we have enough documentation and enough detail. And then finally, we need to update or import the web class, but we also need to import the equivalent of this PNP object, which in this case is going to be SP from @pnp-sp. So another thing we've tried to do, I'm going to comment all of those imports out now. So another thing we've tried to do is ensure, I forgot a comma, is ensure or to make things easier. So this SP library has the main export is SP. The graph library's main export is graph. And so that's hopefully going to help, again, with the transition of moving to these things and helping, mentally what maps to what. But so this SP replaces that PNP variable and actually is just if you remember pnp.sp the rest of the chain, just take away the PNP part. So I want to come down and let's update our actual code now. Well, you can see right away the logging stuff needs no updates. There's been no changes in the logging framework on the PNP side. So we changed our imports. It now works as before. So if you've put logging throughout your code, change your imports at the top of the file, logging is going to continue to work exactly as it did. No changes there. Great. Our next change, we see a little red squiggle, is this PNP setup. The only change there is change PNP to SP, and we're going to do SP setup. And we do it exactly the same. We pass it the SPF context, and the format of this object has not changed from the 3.0 version of SPPNP.js. So it has changed from the 2.0, but from the 3.0 version, no changes there. So that'll simplify, hopefully, again, the migration by changing the PNP to SP. Our SP setup will be complete. We'll come down here to the render method. We have a couple other changes. No changes to the web. Our web object still works, so if you're using the web object directly and passing in URLs, that's still going to work just fine. You still select off the web and can chain off the web exactly as before. But one thing that has changed is instead of get as, you now just need to do get. And that's because the TypeScript language was updated so we can actually do default types in generic arguments. So we could make that any by default, and you can specify what you want it to be. So get as goes away. You just need to use get now, except the functionality is exactly the same. So I'm going to do the same thing down here. We'll change get as just to get. And the last thing here is I'm just going to delete pnp, and then everything else will work the same. So I can do sp web list select, get, and then I get my lists. And that's all our updates. And everything you've come to expect to be there is on the SP variable or object now. So you can say SP web, lists, etc., get by title. All of that still works exactly the same. We've just changed the starting point of where you're going to chain from. And so that's it. That's all our updates, and we're now using the new libraries. So I want to sort of show that work by saying gulp serve again, and there's our web part working exactly as before. And I'll assume you can trust me that it's the new web part with the new code, so I'll re-add it to the page. And there it is. So everything's working as it did before, and we've updated our code to use the new @pnp scoped libraries. So not a lot of changes, not a lot of complicated changes. Hopefully folks will have a very easy time with that. Again, we're working to smooth that out, so any feedback on that process will be much appreciated. There will be a video recorded and posted as well, which is pretty much what I just showed you, but sort of isolated out of this call to show that update. And I think we've covered here the most common scenarios of chaining off of PNP, using logging, importing things like util, and then the setup on init. So I think we've covered a good chunk of the normal updates here. And then we've shown simple string concatenation to update our DOM element, which is a perfectly valid way to do it for simple things. I keep loving to say that. You don't need a big, complicated framework for simple web parts. So did want to show folks, before I pass things off to Vesa, we are updating, just did a big update on docs yesterday, so you can see this is the github.com/pnp/pnp. It's the redundancy department of redundancy, but this is updated README, talks about documentation, and then links to the different packages that are part of this repro, and we've got documentation for each of those packages. Again, this is pretty bare bones, but we're working on improving it as we go. And then we also have the GitHub Pages site is up and live in the sense that it exists. Obviously, it's probably the best looking website you'll see today. But one thing I would especially like feedback on is if you come here and go to the transition guide, we're working, and you can see where I've got a to-do to record the video and things like that, but we're working on making this transition guide very clear and to really help folks easily transition from SPPNP.js to the new libraries. And one of the things I want to always mention is we're going to continue supporting SPPNP.js for 6 months once we release the @PNP libraries. After that 6 months, the core team will no longer be sort of actively supporting it. Our focus will move entirely to these libraries, but we will always be accepting pull requests and things like that from the community if folks want to work on or improve or fix a bug, something like that in SPPNP.js. It won't go away. It will remain there in GitHub. It's not going to be unpublished from NPM or anything drastic like that. So if you're using it in your projects now, there's no immediate absolute need to move on a certain schedule. Just know that after 6 months, our core team focus will move entirely to these new libraries. So you've got plenty of time to transition, plenty of time to help us help you transition in terms of giving us the feedback. And so definitely look for and invite that feedback from everybody. So I'm going to jump back now to the presentation. And go back to the, no. One of these days I'm going to learn how to use PowerPoint or how to use Skype, and we're just going to be on Teams at that point. Changing the font from Times. Well, I don't know. Times is very classic. Brings that nostalgia of a ancient newspaper to the web. And so I think we're all set for SharePoint Framework update from Vesa.
Also, let me actually take over the presentation. So, and again, I just reiterate for those who are arrived slightly late. So that section was around the pnp-js-core and the transitions on those libraries. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff happening in the SharePoint PnP side. We're looking into having all of the cross-linking and everything else across all of the sites and URLs so that people are not getting confused. Because obviously, we will keep on doing, and the core team will keep on doing, for example, PnP PowerShell in the future still, even though Patrick, you, in the context of pnp-js-core, you said the core team will never not do anything else than these libraries. Obviously, the larger PnP core team will, but the core team of the pnp-js-core, it's a different thing. But anyway.
Yeah, sorry, absolutely. Everything else continues on. I was speaking strictly in the context of the client-side libraries. And I want to speak, I'll answer this again just because Matthew's asked to do this again. So right now we've got the SPFx library is the JavaScript client-side library that the Patterns and Practices program has put out. And we've been supporting that for over a year. But we want to move now to these new libraries, these @PNP scoped libraries, which will contain all of the same functionality, just slightly, positioned slightly differently. And so what we're saying is we're going to give everybody a 6-month timeline from when we release the @PNP scoped libraries to when we, the core team, will stop actively supporting SPPMP.js. And we will focus our efforts on the new libraries, but the SPPMP.js will remain there in NPM, in GitHub forever. I mean, well, until I guess the sun explodes. But we, will have.
Do you have some insights on that one? Because it's forever or until the sun explodes. No, never mind.
Well, I gotta have a disclaimer of some sort, right? But but so the idea is that 6 months gives folks plenty of time to migrate existing projects or move new projects to the new libraries. The new libraries aren't out yet. They're out in beta. Folks can absolutely please try them out and let us hear some feedback. But we'll get those out, and the idea being folks would migrate their projects to the new @PNP libraries. And again, we're looking to make that transition as smooth as possible.
And again, reiterating that only applies for the SPPMP.js library. Nothing to do with SharePoint Framework, nothing to do with REST APIs or anything else on the SharePoint development, only if you're using the old SPPMP.js library. So, just to be super clear on that. Okay.
Nothing with System, nothing with PowerShell.
Exactly. So let's move into the SharePoint Framework side and to some latest news on this one. I will not have a demo this time because we were actually expecting not to have this many people in the call, but it's good to see the interest, even though it is a holiday season. But we should have plenty of time for Q&A if we have any. But some news and some things to actually cover. Let's see if I can get my clicker to work properly. There we go. So since the 2 weeks ago, special interest group, we had the special interest group for SharePoint Framework. Since that, we have released now the SharePoint Framework 1.4. So that came out actually, I would say, 1 hour after the previous special interest group call. In the previous special interest group call, I think we demonstrated the asset packaging already. So I'm not going to actually do that in here. We do have a webcast available for that one. We do have other videos available on how this actually works. And the tutorials have been updated to match the asset packaging. Well, the web part tutorials. And what this one meant, and just to clarify on this one, so if you are building a SharePoint Framework solutions using the SharePoint Framework 1.4 or newer, pretty soon there will be again a newer version. It's from this moment forward. You do not need to anymore worry about hosting the JavaScript files if you don't want to. So by default, whenever you package your SPFx file, the JavaScript files and manifest files and everything else is inside of the SPFx file. And if your tenant has an Office 365 CDN enabled, we will automatically serve all of the JavaScript files from the Office 365 CDN. If your tenant doesn't have Office 365 CDN enabled, we will automatically serve the JavaScript files from the tenant app catalog site collection. But the key point here is that the step which in the past you were forced to do, which is put your JavaScript files on a CDN, update the URLs properly and everything else, that's no longer needed unless you explicitly want to do that. And that's a really, really important and a great improvement. So this is super functionality from that perspective. Now, again, mentioned quite a few times, but reiterating the message as well. If you choose to, or if you wish and you want to host this stuff, for example, in Azure CDN or in, let's say, Amazon CDN, I don't know if they have a CDN, I haven't checked, you can still do that. You just flip the setting in the packaging, in the package JSON, package solution JSON file, not to actually include the assets inside of the package. What's good about this one also is the fact that since the JavaScript files are inside of the SPFx package, I can actually create the SPFx file, the solution file, and I can send it to Patrick or Sebastian or whoever and say, hey, have a look. And they can just add it in their tenant and voila, it will work. Because I don't need to worry about where the JavaScript files are being hosted or I don't need to worry about getting them hosted. They are hosted automatically when the SPFx files are getting deployed. So in some sense, yes, Sebastian, you're now famous. So in some sense, you might kind of start thinking that this is, well, in quotes, the idea is almost similar as sandbox solution, but we probably shouldn't confuse people by using the sandbox solution term. But basically, you are encapsulating your customizations inside of the SPFx file, and you're able to deploy that to your tenant. And that's super cool. We did have a small challenge with the asset hosting plus the site collection app catalog, but that bug should have been already resolved. So if you are looking into or using the site collection app catalog option, that now supports the assets packaging as well, or it's getting rolled out as we speak in production. Now, key points quickly on the asset packaging, kind of I mentioned this one already. Why is this important? So there's no additional asset hosting location needed, so everything is inside of the package. Organization in control of the solution asset. And this is basically meaning that if you're getting the SPFx file or a solution from the third party, you as the tenant owner, because the assets are getting automatically hosted from your tenant, you actually control when the assets are getting updated. So your SPFx files are not referencing a rendered JavaScript file from internets from somewhere in the URL. You actually have it inside of your tenant. And that's really cool because then you control when the files are getting updated. Really important thing. And then you can easily use the same package to test the stuff in the dev, in the user acceptance tenant or the user acceptance environment, depending on your setup, and then in the production. So you can easily do, and the same code will move automatically across environments. You don't need to worry about any URLs. We'll take care of all of that for you. So it's super cool capability. There is a webcast on this one where we do have a live demo available, and I think that went live last Monday or Monday before that, if I remember correctly. Now, other stuff. So quickly, I've been kind of keeping this in the special interest group for both special interest groups what we have. Just keep this up to date. So right now, what has happened is the site-specific app catalog is out, ALM APIs are out, asset included in deployment packages is out. Last time, 2 weeks ago, that wasn't quite yet out. Site designs with an extensibility point, the docs are out for that one, and it's gradually getting enabled in the first release. So we unfortunately found out a small deployment challenge on that one, so it seems to be that we need to still wait a few more days to get the site designs and with an extensibility point to truly work cross globally in the previous status. But that's getting handled within a days. Now, the really kind of an exciting capability what people have been waiting for a long time is more Microsoft Graph support. Originally, we did actually promised to release this by end of this year. And we failed, and I do apologize on that, because it will be actually getting available on the first or second week of January. Well, that's the current ETA. But what it actually means is that you can define as a tenant administrator what are the permissions and scopes which are available for the graph or for external APIs. So that is a super cool capability, and I do have a slide coming up on after this one, where I'm trying to explain quickly what is it all about. So this is I quickly drew that like 15 minutes before the call. First time ever trying to explain how things are actually working. But let's get back on that one in a second. These two other big things are hub sites and hub APIs and Groupify APIs. Today we actually released a new version of Season and PowerShell commandlets for SharePoint in general, SharePoint Online in general, and those actually contain some new capabilities for Groupify and for hub sites. They do not, however, yet work because the capabilities have not been enabled. But whenever within the early January, in January timeframe, you will see announcements whenever the hub sites and Groupify APIs will move into previous status, and then those APIs will be enabled as well. Our deployment mechanisms work in a way that how would I put it? This is almost like old school way. No, let's not actually even do that comparison because people might freak out. It works in a way that we push out stuff on SharePoint Online and new versions on the SharePoint Online, and then when we actually decide, we enable the functionality. So we enable the flight in our internal terminology. So the fact that the API exists, it doesn't mean that it actually works. We need to explicitly enable the capability after it has been rolled out. And the reason why we do this is that rolling out a new API, rolling out new capabilities worldwide across tens and hundreds of thousands or millions of tenants does take a few days. And that means that we can't really, the only way we can actually flip our fingers and say that it's now available in the best possible way is to do it in a way that we push first the features and then we enable the functionality. Now, on the Microsoft Graph, more support on that one. I'm not going to do a live demo on this one. We're working on documentations on that. We're working on final polishing that. It's not quite yet ready to do a live demo. But what I wanted to do is quickly explain what are we talking and what does it actually mean. So starting from early January, first week or second week is the ETA right now, you can actually configure additional permissions for the Graph client. And what it means is that the tenant admin, now my animations is completely, you took a wrong version, Patrick. No. Okay, let me try to explain it without that. So
I didn't take a wrong version. OneDrive synced the wrong version. Let's be clear.
That's true. Yeah, fair point. Okay, so what it means is that the tenant administrator can and has PowerShell commandlets in SharePoint Online PowerShell and also REST APIs and functionalities to configure additional permissions to this new object, which is getting provisioned on every single Azure AD instance, which is called a SharePoint Online client. And this is essentially one application in Azure AD where the admin can then provide additional permissions, like additional scopes for Graph and whatever is needed. And then whenever the client-side web part is using, for example, the Graph endpoint, it is requesting the access token automatically from Azure AD directory. It is getting the access token. That bearer token will contain the additional permissions and scopes, and when it's calling that external API, for example, we can actually make the things work properly because it's calling using the right scopes and right permissions. So basically, starting from early January, we will start the preview of this functionality, where you're able to then call in a secured way, first of all, additional Graph scopes, also any other Azure AD applications or third-party web APIs in a secured way in SharePoint Online. And that's super cool. But how it works, like mentioned, is that we provision you a SharePoint Online client application to Azure AD, and then administrator can configure that using our abstraction layer. And then based on those permissions, what's there, the Graph client, the new Microsoft Graph client object, and also the Azure AD HTTP client is getting the access tokens, and you're able to then execute stuff. But super cool stuff. Like I said, I can't quite demo this today due to a few technical issues. We've been having, and I don't want to show you eDoc, which is slightly too early environment. But this will be super great stuff because this, for me at least, calling securely the third-party custom web API is the holy grail of SharePoint Online development. It's been the thing what people have been asking from day one in SharePoint Online. How do I securely call in an authenticated manner, including authorization, a third-party web API which is hosted in Azure to unblock all of the options and possibilities what we have in Azure? And voila, it's coming. And that's absolutely mind-blowing and absolutely brilliant. Good. With magic of puppets, yes. Microsoft Graph Client is an app defined in Azure AD. Sorry. Yes. So for Bill Ayers, the Microsoft Graph Client is a new object actually in the SharePoint framework. And the Azure AD HTTP client is a new object as well. The Microsoft Graph Client is just a wrapper on top of the Microsoft Graph JavaScript library, and you can easily use that. It will hide the complexity of calling access and getting the access token. It will take care of all of that for you. The actual application in Azure AD is called SharePoint Online Client. If you are the administrator of the Azure AD, you can actually see that there. And that's the one where we provide the permissions. Technically also, if you as a developer or if you're an ISV developer and your solution requires, for example, certain scopes, whenever you install the solution to the app catalog, you can configure that solution to indicate that, hey, we have additional permission requirements. So this solution actually requires, for example, what would it be? People contacts read permission for the users, and you can actually in this solution package JSON file you can define that there's additional permissions needed and additional scopes for the graph. And when that happens, when somebody is installing the solution to the app catalog, the tenant admin is going to be notified that, hey, this solution requires scopes, which are not the default scope, additional scopes, so please go through the approval process. We do have an approval functionalities for these additional scopes in the central admin UI or using a PowerShell. So there's the approval process for getting the scopes, what the solutions are requesting. But ultimately what happens is that you are adding permissions to the SharePoint Online Client object, which is in Azure AD. And depending on those permissions, depending on the scopes which has been configured for that one, then you have access in the Microsoft Graph Client or in the Azure AD HTTP client. So it's super cool stuff. Quickly looking into the questions, somebody got a Surface Book 2. That's pretty cool. So there is a single app for all SPFx solution that use the graph. That is correct, and that's a good point from Philip as well. So you might have multiple solutions which have slightly different scope requirements, for example, for graph. And you as a developer, you can configure those scope requirements in the SPFx file. There is, however, only one object. So we are not dynamically provisioning Azure AD application objects to the Azure AD per solution. There's only one object in the Azure AD, and super important thing to realize. And that means that if there's two applications which are requesting different scopes, you will enable both of those scopes to that one single object. And that means that it might be that there's another application which isn't asking any permissions in the SPFx file or in a package.json file, but when it's actually calling the Graph API, it will have the same access tokens as well. And that's why this is a tenant administrative operation. And in our documentation, we will absolutely go through in detail what does it actually mean, what are the implications. Whenever you, for example, uninstall a solution from the app catalog, it does not remove any of these permissions or any of the scopes. So this is using ADAL still, because ADAL is the only, let's say, officially released version of the JavaScript libraries to talk against Azure AD. MSIL, I don't think it has not yet been released to a final version, or it wasn't at least released when the decision on the tech for this one was actually done. Now, obviously in the future, when things are evolving, we will absolutely keep on evolving this implementation as well. And definitely going to need a special video. Yes, we will have an extended tutorials. We're looking into having a tutorial on the basic flow, so how to actually configure or write a web part which is actually requesting additional scopes of the graph, and then what's the approval process for that. The second video or tutorial plus video will be around how to create a third-party web API. The third-party web API and configure that to be accessible and callable from the SharePoint Framework web part. But if we cover both of those as a tutorial and then we have additional documentation which walks through all the terminologies and everything else, I think we should be in a relatively good shape with the code examples, videos, and written format. Updates on December were just in time. Thank you. Save for me having to do one. Okay, that sounds good. But that's pretty much on the graph and third-party API access support. If you are interested, this end-to-end process did not really change that much since the Ignite demo. So in Ignite, Paolo Pialorsi actually demonstrated this functionality. It was Paolo's and Luca Bandinelli's session, or Luca Bandinelli's session, where Paolo was doing actual demos, where they demonstrated the functionality of calling a third-party web API using this method from a SharePoint Framework solution. Good. That's it for that one. Where's my clicker? My clicker is over there. But that's it for the SharePoint Framework side. So like mentioned, I could not unfortunately quite demonstrate that yet. On the next time, on the 4th of January, I will promise that we will have a live demo, regardless is it already shipped or not shipped. Most likely it's not shipped because obviously people are on vacation right now, or majority of people in Redmond are on vacation. But we'll see in early January this will be shipped. But in the 4th of January, is it 4th? I think it's 4th of January, isn't it, Patrick? The next special interest group call for SPFx. Yes, it is. I will actually do a live demo on the graph functionality, so we can have a discussion. I can walk through the process. I can walk through the details inside of it as well. And like I said, there will be tutorials, there will be examples, there will be videos around this one, which we're currently working, and making sure also that the functionality is working. Cool. I think we need to head down to the Q&A section. We promised to have time for Q&A, and for once, we actually have time for Q&A. This is brilliant. Any news on when managed metadata will be added to the SPPMP REST API? So Christian has a good question. So this is the most requested capability on the user voice. And yes, this is actually highly requested capability. So technically, to be able to add that to the pnp-js-core, it requires that there's a native REST API to be able to call. Or theoretically, the SPPMP-JS could call, use the CSAM API, but that would not be that optimal because that would be hacking. We in the SharePoint engineering, which I do represent as well, we are looking into having investments on the advanced documentation scenarios and the ECM scenarios more and more starting from the second half, the first half of next calendar year, starting from January. Now, will the taxonomy APIs be the first phase of that ECM story? I don't know, but it's coming relatively soon. We absolutely understand that there's a massive demand for that. There's also discussions on maybe the taxonomy service should be raised above SharePoint, so it should not be just a SharePoint-specific taxonomy service. Maybe it should be Office 365-wide taxonomy service. And if that's the case, then there will be even further delays on actually getting the REST APIs, because getting the taxonomy service raised from a SharePoint level to the Office 365 level will actually be a big thing. It would be highly beneficial, no doubt, but it would actually delay on getting the right implementation up. So technically on the JavaScript PnP-JS side, we could write a wrapper on the CSAM calls, but it doesn't feel right. It's a hack. So that's the problem.
So I've looked at that, and I've looked at wrapping the JSON stuff, and it's something I'm a little bit more open to now that we could have a separate package that not everybody would have to worry about. Like you could have an at pnp/metadata or whatever, we come up with a good name for it. The issue is it's not pretty, one, and it doesn't. So we have kind of that Fluent API that we've used throughout the libraries, and it doesn't flow well in that. But it's not something I've given up on. I've kind of been hoping maybe the product group was going to do something in this space, but it's sounding more and more like no. So keep your ears peeled.
Let's do this. Engineering will absolutely look on the space. Will we do that investment within the following few months? Answer is no. Let's be realistic.
So. Yeah. So I haven't. It's in the back of my mind, and the need has definitely been heard. So it's something I'm looking at doing, but it's not at the top of my list. I'm trying to get the other stuff, the documentation done and out, so we can do the release.
Yep.
It would be bad if you sort of hacked an API and then had to change it because the REST API looked completely different when it came.
That's true as well. Yes. Yep. Well, technically, we have hacked the taxonomy CSAM API already for the taxonomy picker, which is in the PnP scope as well. So the reusable taxonomy picker for SharePoint Framework web parts is actually using and exposing taxonomy services through the CSAM API. And in engineering, we thought about this, and basically we said, well, that's the only way to make that happen, by using the CSAM wrapper, or faking to be a CSAM and calling that endpoint using a JavaScript APIs. So we do have this implementation already in the taxonomy picker. So we could actually use that one to simplify, well, to draw some, at least reduce the work needed for pnp-js-core. But let's see. We need to figure out, first things first, we need to get the new version of the pnp-js-core out, the community library for JavaScript APIs, and then the taxonomy side after that.
And to jump up Pedro's question, ETA on that release, sometime early in the new year. Honestly, at this point, it's dependent on getting all the documentation I can get done. But the code, because I'm a developer, so the code's basically done, and I'm just behind on documentation. So if you want to grab the beta versions off the beta channel for those libraries, they're essentially code complete at this point. So I wouldn't say maybe dropping them in production quite yet, but what's there now is what's going to be the release, more or less. So feel free to please try those out and give us any feedback you've got. And we'll have a date. We'll make sure the date of announcement is big and bold for when we actually do get those released.
Coming back on the previous questions, I think you jumped quite a lot far. There was a question from Rodriguez. Has anyone got an error when trying to use a new asset packaging capability, which is invalid SharePoint app package? Error bar URL is not valid per rules defined in the Open Package Convention specification. Now, Rodriguez, I haven't seen that. But what I would actually recommend is to get the repro steps to our issue list. And this is something for everybody in this call. So when you run into issues in the SharePoint framework, and I should have had a slide on this one, but I'll add that one for the future SIG calls. But if you run into an issue, you have a question, you run into random exceptions in SPFx, please go to the issue list, SPDevDocs issue list. This list is getting replicated to our Visual Studio Online. Our engineers are reading this, and we do have a triage twice or 3 times in a week. We look into this list, we assign the tasks to our engineers to investigate if there's problems. So this is your shortcut to actually report and get input from engineering by providing the needed repro there. Now, there will be, and there's always delays on getting things done. On PO's comment, depending on an issue, typically we should have had labeling at least for your issue, so which indicates that it has been touched. So Cameron, can you, if you paste in the issue there, let's have a look on what it is, and I'll come back on the issue. But every single item in this issue list is getting triaged. Now, we do not have a massive amount of engineering resources, which means that we need to balance the work what we do on this issue list investigation with the new functionalities which are planning to ship. So there is always a delay, but easy way of getting some level of support. Plus the fact that community helps community in this issue list as well. So there's a lot of answers and a lot of issues are getting closed because other people in the community are helping and saying, hey, good question, this is how you actually make that happen. But so please, if you run into critical issues, please use the issue list. We need to know so we can actually fix the issues. Quickly coming back on I think that was Rodriguez's question. I'm just making sure that we don't actually miss anything. That was the metadata, that was Rodriguez, managed metadata. End of the day, people are doing it JSON OM way by themselves now. Yeah, that's not that pretty exactly. And that's around the MMS, managed metadata stuff. Editing experience for SPFx field customizers. So David is asking around the editing experience. If you're building a field customizer for SharePoint Framework extension, that is only for the read-only experience. Now, the editing experience is not there yet. We just changed the editing experience in a modern list. If you have noticed that, you are no longer redirected to a separate page. The editing experience is inside of the list or library, so you'll be actually in the same context. Now that we have done that change, we are able to start looking into how to expose the editing experience for field customizers as well. The owner of the owner of the modern list and libraries is aware of the request. They understand the request, and again, it's a matter of prioritizing that in our roadmap. When I can give you a timeline, but I know that it has been discussed in our internal discussions. Node 8x support, so that's a good thing to discuss as well. Right now, SPFx only supports Node 6.x. So if you're using a Node 8x or 9x, you might run into unexpected issues. The Node 8 support is something which has been started being done in engineering quite a few times, and then people run into issues, and then we needed to ship, and then we needed to prioritize the shipping before adding the Node 8 support because something were forced to get shipped. So, but that is now high priority on the task, and it should getting out, the support should be coming in super early, well, early January. Obviously, right now, we're not shipping anything because it's holiday season. Good. I think that was all questions which were pending, at least from the past, unless I missed something. Patrick, did I miss something?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. And thanks. Oh, Philip has a question. I can actually guess. Yeah, I remember this, your number even. So we are looking into this one as well. This has been raised as an internal priority pretty recently. The status is equal tracked, meaning that it has been acknowledged internally. The 1042 issue seems to be related in two different things, like actually Waldek commented in the issue as well. So we are using, for example, Waldek as one of the resources and one of the persons who are helping on reducing the load for engineering, and he is doing some level of an investigation as well. So this seems to be do two different things. There seems to be an issue actually in our sample, which isn't super optimal, and there seems to be a small issue in the SPFx related on the handling as well. Right now, like I said, for this week and next week, and there's nobody in Redmond who can actually fix this, and we're not shipping anything because we're in a freeze period. Because we don't want to actually ship something 2 days before Christmas, because nobody wants to be sitting on Christmas Eve. Somebody's going to call you and ask you a question because SharePoint Online went down. You don't want to be that guy. So we're not actually touching SharePoint Online right now for those reasons. But this one has been acknowledged. We know that we need to fix them. So. Yeah, thanks, Jim. Yeah, that's a good internal joke. That's from a master certification program, rotation 6, back in 2010 or something like that. Yeah, indeed. Thanks, Jim. Any other questions? Oh, we ran out of time, actually. Patrick, do you want to close up, or what do you want to do?
Yep. Well, I just want to say thank you to everybody for a great year. It's been a blast for me, and I hope everybody else has enjoyed the journey, and look forward to great things in 2018. Hope everybody gets some time off and get to relax and enjoy not working for a period of time. But I want to say thank you for myself and everybody else on the core team, for all of you that participate in these calls and on the rest of the work we do. It really means a lot to us. It's really exciting, and I look forward to where we're going to end up next year and the years after that. We will have a meeting January 4th. Will be the next SPFx JS SIG meeting, and the next general development SIG. Are you guys going to do this next week on the 28th?
I haven't actually yet decided. We're not expecting that many people to be there anyway, so we might drop by for Q&A. So
maybe
I'm
something
working
on
the
the
whole
28th,
holiday.
which will be a laid back session if it happens.
Yeah.
But anyway, look forward to seeing everybody again in 2018. Thank you for making all of this possible. Learn, reuse, share. Thanks for being part of Patterns and Practices. Have a great rest of your year. Bye.
Thank you.